In the 70s, this band was supposed to be the next Beatles. Even the Beatles themselves thought that. With songs like this.
Sunny, if you want it, here it is. Come and get it, but you better hurry 'cause it's going fast.
Had everything going for them, but the band's career suffered from incredibly bad luck, mismanagement, and tragedy that would take the ultimate tolls on their lives. And a big thanks to James Harrington for submitting the video idea through the Google form. The link is in the description if you want to do the same. It's been fascinating learning about this one. So their story began in Swansea, Wales, in the late 1960s. Originally known as the Ivies, their best known lineup was Pete Ham on vocals and guitar, Tom Evans on bass, Mike Gibbons on drums, and Joey Molland also on the guitar. That's not the original lineup, but it's considered vintage Badfinger. Now the lineup would change and evolve through the years, partly due to tragedy. More on that later. They started earning a name for themselves playing local shows around Swansea. The band started earning a little following with their raw talent, but they had no idea what was waiting for them. The Beatles were at the height of their powers during the 60s and always kept their eyes out for new talent. In 1968, they started their own record label, Apple Records, and started looking for new bands to potentially sign. Apple Records had nothing to do with iPods and iPhones, by the way. That company wouldn't be founded till the late 70s. Anyway, things were in motion that would change the Ivies forever. In 1966, they acquired a manager, Bill Collins. Collins had contact with Mal Evans, a roadie for the Beatles. Collins invited Mal Evans to come and see the Ivies, and Evans liked what he saw. He immediately pushed demo tapes of the band to Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, better known as the Beatles. And in what must have seemed like a gift from heaven for the Ivies, the Beatles loved them, and they were immediately signed. Can you imagine being a young band playing shows in your hometown, and Paul McCartney himself picks you up and tells you he's going to produce you? It must have blown their minds. Well, that's exactly what happened. Paul actually wrote and produced what would become their first big hit, Come and Get It, released in 1969. The song was actually written specifically for the movie The Magic Christian, which starred Ringo Starr and Peter Sellers.
If you want it anytime, I can give it, but you better hurry 'cause it may not last.
It sounds like the Beatles' little sibling trying to step out of the shadows. Nice and poppy with jangly guitars and some sweet harmonies. Unsurprisingly, this is where comparisons to the Beatles started. They did release their debut album before this though. It was called Maybe Tomorrow, and it was actually produced by future David Bowie producer Tony Visconti. But this album was only released in Japan, West Germany, and Italy. The release of the album was halted in the UK and US. People theorise it's because when Alan Klein took over Apple Records, he immediately halted all non-Beatles releases while he went over the finances, which were in disarray at the time. So really, for most of the world, Come and Get It was their first introduction. The song went top 10 around the world and sold over 1 million copies. With the Beatles on board, their future was bright and the ball started rolling. Somewhere around this time, they changed their name from the Ivies to Badfinger. And that name was inspired by the working title of the Beatles track With a Little Help from My Friends, which was Badfinger Boogie. That was something to do with John Lennon having injured a finger. They contributed more songs to the soundtrack for The Magic Christian, and combined with some material from the Maybe Tomorrow album and Come and Get It, they dropped Magic Christian Music with Apple Records in 1970. So far in the story, everything looks bright. Bit of a bumpy start, sure, but a bright future ahead of them. But trust me, the tragedy's coming. But before that, let's talk about what made Badfinger great in the first place, because honestly, their music was something special. After Paul McCartney handed them Come and Get It, the band really started to find their own feet. That song put them on the map, and it was the start of a run of tunes that sounded like the Beatles if they decided to keep making power pop instead of going all psychedelic. Magic Christian Music was a solid album, but it was their follow-up album, No Dice, that really blew the doors open. With songs like No Matter What, it climbed all the way to number 8 in the US charts, and showed the world that Badfinger weren't just a flash in the pan. And then there was the absolute heartbreaker, Without You.
I can't live if living is without you.
It's a proper gut punch heartbreak ballad, and it's gone on to become one of the most covered songs in pop history. So yeah, their songwriting abilities were certainly up there. They weren't just riding the Beatles' wave either. They had their own sound, full of tight harmonies, slick guitar work, and melodies. And they were doing it all on Apple Records, the Beatles label, with Paul and George Harrison helping out as producers and mentors. Speaking of George Harrison, he actually played the slide guitar solo on Day After Day, which came from their 1971 album Straight Up. That song is a classic example of their sound. Heartfelt, melodic, but with enough rock edge to keep it exciting. So between 1969 and 1972, they had multiple hits, successful albums, and a great relationship with maybe the biggest band on the planet at that time. They looked like they were set for greatness. Despite the hits and the talent, everything started to unravel behind the scenes. Bad management, shady contracts, and a series of disasters that would haunt the band for decades. In the early to mid-70s, as mentioned, Apple Records was in turmoil. Mismanagement and money issues were causing tension among the label and the bands under their wing. And Badfinger was getting frustrated with being pushed in different musical directions. They also had their contract changed to offer them less money and less royalties. This tension would slowly build for years, leaking into the relationships of the band members. But the worst of all has to be their manager after Bill Collins, a guy called Stan Polly. Polly took over as the band grew too big for Collins, the manager who'd helped them find their feet. This man ruined them. Despite their musical success, Badfinger's financial situation was dire. Polly was a notorious figure in the music industry, known for his unethical practices. He convinced the band to sign contracts that were heavily in his favour, whilst appearing to be making them millions, and mismanaged their finances with a criminal and cynical ruthlessness. In 1974, Warner Brothers Records filed a lawsuit against Polly when they discovered that the band's advances had been placed into an escrow account controlled by him, and the funds were missing. This financial mismanagement crippled the band, leaving them in debt and without the means to continue their music career. But it wasn't the money and the music that was the biggest loss. Money can be replaced, new music can be written. Stan Polly didn't just cost them their livelihoods, this man literally cost them their lives. The turmoil and financial strain took a toll on Pete Ham, the band's primary songwriter. Reportedly in April 1975, Ham received a phone call informing him that all his money had disappeared. Devastated, he went to the pub with Tom Evans, drank heavily, and returned home. And in the morning of April 24th, Ham's partner, Anne Harriet, found him in their garage. He had committed suicide. There was a note which reportedly read, "I will not be allowed to love and trust everybody. This is better, Pete." And then just below where he'd signed his name, the note added, "P.S. Stan Polly is a soulless bastard. I will take him with me." Despite Ham directly blaming him in his final message, no investigation or charges were ever aimed at Stan Polly regarding his death. Ham's death was a devastating blow to the band. He was only 27 years old and had a daughter who was born a month after his passing. His death marked the beginning of the end for Badfinger. Following Ham's death, the remaining members of Badfinger attempted to continue, but the damage was done. And in 1983, Tom Evans, who had co-written Without You, became embroiled in a dispute over royalties for the song. The argument, with bandmate Joey Molland, escalated, and Evans tragically took his own life later that year. That's 2 lives lost in the fallout of Polly's destruction of Badfinger. Joey Molland continued to perform and record music both as a solo artist and with various incarnations of Badfinger. Despite the challenges, he remained dedicated to preserving the band's legacy. And in recent years, Badfinger's music experienced a bit of a resurgence in popularity. Their song Baby Blue was featured in the series finale of Breaking Bad. Towards the end of the 70s, another band burst into the limelight with a song called My Sharona. The Knack was destined to be absolutely massive. But whatever happened to them? You can watch this one next to find out.